Hey there, Mr. Myers is here. How you doing? This is part one of a two-part series on using the quadratic formula. And you know, I could normally just put one video together with quadratic formula, but I think it's useful looking at two smaller videos so that way we can see some what happens when we have to simplify the square root part, and what happens when we have to simplify just one that has real solutions, real solutions, and that you know, it doesn't have too many complicated things going on. So what we're going to do here on this video is I'm going to first show you how we get the quadratic formula. Then we'll use the quadratic formula. It's good to know how we get it, but really it's not, you know, we're not going to use that information later on. We're just going to use the quadratic formula. So what I did in this video, though, is I put the practice problems at the end of the video. I'm just going to show you what the answers are, and if you have any questions on how I got those answers, please come in, see me at school if you're one of my students. If not, then you know, maybe I'll make another video and showing how to do those actual problems. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the screen. All right, so up here I have the quadratic formula. Now we're going to derive the quadratic formula. So derive means that we're going to come up with it, and we're going to come up with it using completing the square. So we're going to take a, and I didn't really go over what we're going to do with the a when we're doing completing the square in my last video. So let me show you what we do. Okay, we're gonna factor out the a. First, I'm going to subtract the c over. Okay, we're going to get negative c here. Okay. And we're going to complete the square. So we're going to get and take b over a and divide it by 2, which is going to give us b over 2a, and then we're going to square it. So we're going to add it here, b squared over 4a squared. We're going to add it over here, although we're going to multiply it with a. So we're going to have b squared all over 4a squared on the bottom times a. It's just going to give us b squared over 4a. Sorry, it's flying here. So then we're gonna take this and we're going to have a is equal to x plus b over 2a. Okay, because that's what we got here, equals negative c plus b squared over 4a. Then we're going to divide, oh, this is a squared, so then we're going to divide a over, and you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to get, and I'm going to do multiply, I'm going to get a common denominator here, so 4a over 4a, and I'm going to get negative 4ac plus b squared over a common denominator 4a. Then I'm going to divide a over. Okay, so if I divide a over, okay, so divide by a, divide this whole thing by a, I'm going to have an a squared on the bottom. This is going to give us an a squared. And then I'm going to take the square root, plus or minus square root. So I'm going to have plus or minus square root of this whole thing, and that's going to be equal to x plus b over 2a. All right, well, notice here that when I take the square root, I really can't do much of the inside, so I'm going to leave this as plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So I'm just taking this part and moving it this way. And then the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of a squared is a. Then I'm going to subtract b over 2a from both sides. Subtract b over 2a, and I'm going to put it all together. Let me move this out of our way here. And I'm going to get negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so this is the quadratic formula. It tells us the x values, okay, when I solve this equation. We use the quadratic formula when we cannot factor. Now, some of you might be looking at going, oh my God, well, you did a lot of stuff there that I quite don't understand. That's okay, because for the most part, all you need to do is know the formula. Okay, so let's take a look at how we use the formula. So the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you can sit there and just memorize it. It's really not that hard to memorize. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You can memorize it. Or you can do, there's some other things you can do to remember it. There's a song, it goes to Pop Goes the Weasel. It goes x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You can do that. Or you can remember there's a story that I've heard. A negative boy couldn't decide whether to be a negative boy couldn't decide to go to a radical party, the radical, and be square, or I can't remember that. I can't remember this off the top of my head. Here we go. Negative boy couldn't decide whether to go to a radical party or be squared. It was or miss out in 4 awesome chicks, and it was all over at 2 a.m. That's how it goes. Okay, you know, that's kind of a silly one. A negative boy couldn't decide to go to a radical party and be squared and miss out in 4 awesome chicks, and it was all over at 2 a.m. All right, so you can remember that. Either way, just memorize it. It's really not that hard to memorize. Okay, so how are we going to use it to solve equations? Well, we're just going to label this as A, this is B, and this is C. We got to remember the formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we're just going to plug in these values into our formula, okay? So let's go ahead and plug them in. And we're going to have x equals negative b, this is negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so you just plug it in the formula, and then we simplify. This is usually the hardest part of simplifying it. 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 12 all over 6. All right, so we get 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 12 is 24 over 6, and we got to simplify the square root of 24. So we can get 6 plus or minus the square root of 24 is 2 square root 6, because this is going to be a 4 and a 6, right? Over 6. Now, here's the thing with simplifying these. You cannot just simplify and cross out these 6's. You need to simplify this one and this one, because remember, this is 2 answers. This is 6 over 6 plus or minus 2 root 6 over 6. So I can separate these into 2 answers here, 6 plus 6 over 6 plus or minus 2 root 6 over 6, which is going to give us 1 plus or minus root 6 over 3. All right, and this would be our answer. All right, some people like to write it as a 2 goes into all of these. Okay, a 2 goes into this 3 times. Let me do this in red. 3 times. A 2 goes into this once. A 2 goes into this 3. So I can write it as 3 plus or minus root 6 over 3. Each of these are the same thing, so you can write it either way. All right, let's take a look at another one. Solve using quadratic formula. So this is A, this is B, and this is C. So let's go ahead and put it in the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of a squared, What you talking about? A squared. Of b squared minus 4ac, that's a negative 15, all over 2a. Okay? So you plug it in and simplify. All right, we're going to pause here just for a second while I do this. I want to do this little bit of stuff in the calculator. All right, we're back here. And I did a little bit of this work in the calculator here. So we're going to get negative 14 plus or minus root, I think this is 626 over 16, which actually has a perfect square root, which is 26 over 16. So then when I solve this out to negative 14 plus 26 over 16, I get 3/4. And when I do negative 14 minus 26 over 16, I get negative 5/2. All right, so we got two answers here. All right, next one. Oh my goodness, fractions. So all you got to do with fractions is clear the fraction, guys. So this we're going to multiply by 12, multiply by 12, multiply by 12, because that's the common denominator. 3 goes into that 4 times, so I get 8x squared, plus 6 goes into this 2 times, 2x, equals 9. And I got to bring that over, so 8x squared plus 2x minus 9 equals 0. And now I'm going to use a quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? So then negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus, because it's a negative times a negative is a positive, 4 times 8 times 9. Geez, guys, these are big numbers here. 4 times 8 times 9 is 288 over 16. 288 plus 4 is 292. I do not think that that has a square root. Let's see, do I have a square root here? It does not. So we would have to simplify that out, and in the sake of time here, I'm not going to go ahead and simplify that out. I'm going to leave it as negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 292 over 16. And I'm sure that this does simplify out somehow. 292 divided by 4, 73. Okay, so there we go. We got 2 root 73. So that's not very nice looking. Over 16, which finally leads us to negative 1 plus or minus root 73 over 8. Ugh. Okay. How do you solve this using the quadratic formula? Well, I'm just going to go real quickly tell you how to start it. Subtract 2x and make sure everything is equal to 0. Because once you got everything equal to 0, then it's not that bad, right? Because then you're going to go x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4. A is 1, c is 11, over 2, a is 1. Okay, and then you're going to simplify that out. All right, so here's one of the practice problems. Okay, so the answer to that practice problem is right there. All right, that's the first practice problem. Let's take a look at the second practice problem. And you're going to want to rearrange these here. Okay, so that way you got your A, B, and C correct. And the answer to the second practice problem is right there. Okay. And here's the third practice problem. Again, you want to rearrange this and get rid of the fractions. And your answer to that one is, there it is, 2 plus or minus root 10 over 3. All right, that's a quadratic formula. There were some problems in here. And so hopefully if you're in my class, we'll take a look at some more examples in class to really get you used to using the quadratic formula, okay? All right, that's it for now. We'll talk to you later. Bye.